Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is Shehnaz Soni. She is an amazing rocket scientist. She actually works for NASA. She's also the author of The Quantum Being. She's a quantum healer. She's also a spiritual alchemist. Now, you might think rocket scientist and spiritual alchemist don't really go together. They do quite well. Now, speaking of NASA, she is started there as a senior flight software engineer and is now a senior system engineer. She worked for Boeing for 20 years prior to that, and her book, Quantum Being, a Self-Sustaining and Magnificent Human Craft, is one I do believe you'll want to read. Now, we met through the Octopus movement. We're both founding members. And she also was a graduate of the University of California at Irvine, which is where my wife was at for a bit. And so Shehnaz, yeah, let's reverse things, right? Shehnaz, glad to have you here. It's such a wonderful moment that I feel so humbled and honored to have you here.
Thank you, Zen, for an amazing introduction. And I'm very grateful to be here because even with your background, your very dynamic background, and combined with mine, I think we're going to have a pretty good explosion.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be an explosion. A wonderful, warm, and fuzzy one.
Yes, of course. The one that shakes you so that you can vibrate with the higher frequencies.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of higher frequencies, my guess, I inquire, how did you first get in touch with the inner side of life, whether it be a voice, an experience, another, an NDE or any of those kinds of things? And it might occur early in life, as a teenager, in your mid-40s or beyond. Where did it begin with you? Because it's obvious that there's been something going on because you've merged two very divergent things, seemingly, and you brought them together in your life. How did that first begin?
I think that for me, it was definitely, I was probably it's interesting because, my awareness of questioning everything around me was kind of more like 6 or 7 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
But my memory of certain trauma that occurred, because my first one occurred at the age of 2, the second one was at the age of 7. Those kind of are interesting because they are a little bit on a separate field because they were traumatic. But the other one where you are more aware on your own was kind of around that time. And I do remember that I was kind of like when I became aware, I realized right away that things are not the way it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was not satisfied with my circumstances, with my condition, with the people that I was with, where I was living. So I instantaneously when I remembered that when I felt that, I was in this quest to integrate everything with me, and it was not. It was like it didn't feel good at all. It's almost like you wake up and you're already somebody's buried you alive in the coffin, and you're like, "What? I'm not dead yet." You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Well, yeah, and you feel alone, separate from everything, even though you're not. That's the first inclination is that, oh gosh, am I that different? I'm having these thoughts and these feelings and these experiences, and you try to share them with others, and they think you're nuts to begin with.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. And
So
and then
how
you
did
think that you're
you,
nuts. Actually, because I thought I was nuts too. Because I always like to question myself, right? So you think that maybe something is really wrong with you.
well, and isn't it true that when you have the intelligence enough or enough intelligence to question yourself, of wondering, hey, am I crazy or not?
Right.
Probably not, right? Because you've got enough wherewithal to ask the question. Because if you really are, you're not going to ask. You're just
That's true.
right.
That's true. You're going to be in a whole different world.
Right. How did you, from that moment of the 7-year itch, let's say, how did you progress from there? What were the types of things that you noticed unfolded, and how did they fit with the outer world? I know that's kind of a
Right.
double-edged sword of a question.
You know, one of the thing about me is that I am very like whoever comes in my field, I'm very real with people, right? Like some people may put you in a category of being naive or not being very like careful about filtering information. But for me, I mean, at the time, of course, I was surrounded by family members who really loved me and
Mm-hmm.
people who were good people, but I was very honest about my questions and my concerns about humanity already. And the good thing was that they never understood me, but then they also said that you're so different. But then they also said that, don't worry about it. Like they kind of gave the answer that they thought was right. And the good thing was that because I knew, like I started figuring it out that people are giving me the best that they know, but that doesn't mean that I need to stop.
Right. Now you mentioned Descartes was right. What do you mean by that? You threw that name in. Let's clarify who Descartes was and what you meant by that.
Okay. You mean like the way I approach people and how
Yeah. Well, you
yes,
mentioned Descartes, or were you saying the cart, kind of like the cart before the horse? I heard a mention of Descartes, which is, one of the original, coordinate masters.
you're talking about I think, therefore I am.
Yes.
That's pretty good. And I think that that's right there answers the question that you have. Yeah. So, and I didn't mention his name, but maybe there's a reason we're supposed to go there. But I think I was kind of alluding the fact that that vulnerability that I offer to people, I think kind of became my secret weapon because on one hand, people did not understand me. On the other hand, they kind of felt that I wasn't completely wrong. You see my point? So they
Mm-hmm.
may not have known the
It had
answer
a little resonance with what you had to say, even though their mind wasn't able to grasp it.
100%. So in a way, you're touching people even when they're not able to walk with you 100%. You're touching them because you are, like you're kind of like affecting them in your own way. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that that is how I kept, when you do that dance, the quantum dance with people, it just keeps magnifying. And then the right people keeps coming, right? And to
Right.
me, like the whole movie was that 20, like fast forward to age 21, and then this big milestone happens in my life where a strange man comes and takes me to a whole new land, a whole new planet, right? To almost open the door for me to truly put everything in practice.
Mm. What a wonderful opportunity.
Exactly. You're
And
right.
it probably began with a bit of trauma and in that transition.
Oh, that was one of the biggest trauma, actually, partly because in that one, I had to leave every single person that I knew that was my, security blanket.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then have to come with a strange man that I don't know, not knowing anything about the culture, language, people, home was very hard.
I think my wife might have experienced some of that. She left the USSR in
Mm.
1989, didn't make it to
Mm.
America until 19, she defected and came here, knew some English and began as her training was a piano pedagogue. So
Mm.
fortunately, there were some folks that knew that she was coming that were um, associated with ASU, Arizona State University.
Okay.
And within just a few weeks of her, she had a choice of coming to Idaho or Arizona. She chose Arizona. And within a few weeks, she was working for the choral and dance department for ASU as an accompanist. So it just really flowed.
That's pretty
Now,
good.
in that process, though, when you had those was going through that transition, what were the kinds of things that you were experiencing? And the reason I ask this is because I'm sure that there's a lot of others out there who have had similar things and may still be having them or just about ready to have them and could use a little bit of guidance and maybe even a few good questions to ask of themselves in the process to help keep them centered and focused. What did you find worked best for you?
Right. Like you're talking about like all this pivotal point in my life when I had this
Hmm.
major transition and how did I integrate that, right, in my
Hmm.
life? I think that it was always that I never accepted circumstances that were not aligned with me 100% as mine. Like I always separated it, right? So like when I look at my reality and if I felt that I wasn't well integrated, then my first goal was to integrate that. And of course, you work with people around you. So like in the case when I got arranged marriage with my husband, he became pretty much my entire family, my friend, my everything. And even though when we started out and what he shared with me on the wedding night really completely took me from the girl who was like, like living in a fairy tale to the girl who is like, holy shit, life
Right.
is truly life is truly a challenge, right? So I kind of had to go from that extreme and grow up. And I couldn't even scream or share that with my family or anyone because nobody knew that, right? So now it's like, and I have already signed up a contract for life to be with this man, right? So part of me was like, because, I come from a religion where I'm not going to ever, divorce was not even something that was in my vocabulary.
Right.
And not only that, nobody in my entire ancestry tree has ever done it, right? So to me, I'm married to him until I am in this human body. So it was a pretty big commitment, knowing right away from the get go that the foundation of the relationship was not as strong as I would have liked it to be, right? But I still was determined to make it work. So what I did was, because the entire situation was that we were financially in a very, very, like, we were in a negative bank balance. Okay,
Hmm.
he was in love with somebody else. So there were all these foundational problem, right? And I'm thinking that the first thing first, I'm completely at his mercy. And if he owes money to people, then we need to figure out how to get out of the debt. So
Hmm.
I was kind of using my logical mind to solve the problem. So right away I said, I have to find a job so I can make money so I can help.
True. The
So
engineer in you is problem solving.
it was all about, and I think that the good thing is that that actually helps because on one hand you can go on a route where you say poor me, look what my family did, because technically, I mean, how people sell women or girls to other people. I wasn't sold, of course I was arranged marriage, but if you really think about it, it feels like almost that, like that.
Didn't really matter. It's something that you weren't really planning on, nor did you particularly choose.
Exactly. So, but I was groomed all my life that my life is going to be like that, where one day a man will come and I'll be married off, and then my life will be all about pleasing him and pleasing his family. So I was kind of brainwashed into that culture.
Sure.
But even then, if you can be prepared, but ultimately when you have to go through it, and plus in my case, the variables were much more being not in the same country
Right.
and having all those challenges. So yeah, I basically started solving problem. And the thing was that I would solve problem during the day, and at night I would cry because I had no way to channel my frustration or communicate with my family. So basically I would cry because he was working pretty hard. So he was gone all day long and he would come really late at night. So I was pretty much with myself. So I
Hmm.
had time to work hard and also cry completely by myself, and realize that this is quite a cage. And then I even realized that I thought that that was a cage. This is a way bigger cage.
How did you extricate yourself from that cage? What were some of the initial pieces of awareness that allowed you to begin to step up and out?
I think it was like everything was building on top of each other. So when I started making money, I mean, I worked on a dry cleaning shop, and I would look at the money like 5 cents and 10 cents, because I'm learning about money. And then I'm also learning English. And then I'm learning interaction with people who were my bosses. I think all like that learning, and then even wearing clothes was a learning for me because I never wore clothes like American clothes, right? Because I was
Mhm.
always covered up, and now I'm wearing jeans and shirt, and it's
Right.
it's like
Totally.
very,
I mean, talk about a culture shock.
yeah, it's very uncomfortable to me. The jeans was very uncomfortable. I just never found it very comfortable. So I'm
Mhm.
wearing all that stuff. And then I'm also attending classes to learn English because I didn't know the language, right? So the thing was that I actually was basically kind of like, how they say that, fire hose, right? Like that learning coming from all, and then I was even taking a driving lesson with my husband, and it was not easy to take a driving lesson from your husband because he had a very high expectation of me. And I, come from a DNA where no woman ever drives. So you see how much overcoming I had to do. So while I was doing all that, when I started taking English classes, I started, seeing other people. And one thing that helped me in my case is that everywhere I went, I can make friends easily.
I can see how that takes place. You've got a very bubbly personality. You're willing to talk.
Yes. And I think that was my secret weapon because, that was my secret sauce because I can form a relationship easily. People wanted to love me. People would say, I want to help you. And even though I'm not a type who's going to take that easily, because I like to do everything by myself.
Sure.
So I had to, but the good thing was that I was creating my support system by having to take care of all the challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that kept opening the door for me because it's like I took one step and then another step. And plus I was very determined to get admission in the UC Irvine as an engineer. And that was my huge goal. So I was all about making sure that I have enough money to pay for that, right? So I needed money for that. And I can speak English so I can be a student there. So I was very goal oriented. So being goal oriented and being friendly has been pretty much my my underlying personality. It's part of my personality.
Sure. Well, and as you know, one of the things that I've just recently become aware of, but not recently, I've been aware of it for a while, just recently dove into it, human design.
Yes.
Right. And those kinds of, that tool combines so many. I mean, I've taken the DISC, Myers-Briggs, Colby, Yo Dolphin, and a dozen others that I can't remember the names of right now.
Yes.
Because I was curious about me. I wanted to see if my own thoughts would, the random questions would reflect back to me how I felt about myself.
Right.
And sure enough, it did. And it gave me insights that I was like, wow, that's really there. Because you think about things and your experience kind of demonstrates to you that you have these things. And yet, coming from your background as well and the spiritual depth and the understanding that there's more, there's a consciousness there that's available and that does seed you with thoughts and opportunities and things of that nature. And I guess I first recognized it, kind of like you in how you grew up. I was orphaned and adopted. I was adopted 6 weeks, but there was always an unconditional love. Wonderful, just absolutely amazing parents. And yet there was that sense of not quite being understood, right? No matter how
Especially
I
when you
tried to
knew.
talk about it.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. So was it because when you knew that you were adopted, you became a little bit biased or you felt that beforehand?
No, I didn't really become biased. I felt the love, felt the unconditional thing, wasn't concerned about that. There was a deeper thing that was going on inside of me that I wasn't really aware of, and yet it popped out when my parents told me I was adopted when my sister arrived and I was 4.5. My questions beyond the, well, why did my parents give me up and all the standard
Right.
stuff.
Right.
I had just a little bit of Sunday school by that time. And my question was, do I have a father and mother in heaven and can I talk to them? I don't know if it was weeks or months later, I'm standing on the stairway at a 2-story home, and I'm on the landing of the stairway, elbows in the windowsill, looking out over the front porch at night, waiting on Dad to come home. Mom's watching TV about 15 feet away or so, and I can hear the TV, and all of a sudden I'm quiet, and in that really truly quiet moment, no thoughts, no anything, I hear this booming male voice that simply says, "Hey, you." And instead of engaging it, I spun around. It startled me a little bit. It didn't frighten me. It just startled me. And I spun around and I wanted to ask Mom if she heard the voice because it
Right.
was loud enough that I knew she should have.
Right.
And she says, "No, I didn't hear any voice. Must have been Peeping Tom." And at that point, I realized I could not deny my experience, and that voice came from within. And it gave me a, cause for pause at that moment, wondering how that all worked. And so I eventually would stand in front of windows at night, and I would send telepathically that same voice out, and I'd stand there and wait for it to come back. And it wasn't until I found that quiet place again of no thinking that it returned. So I learned really young that, you ask the questions, you gotta learn to shut up and listen.
That's true. Because when you ask a question, the answer comes in so many forms, right?
It does.
It comes in many forms. That is interesting. And yeah, the reason I ask, because majority of us, because even like for me, like you always wonder, because when you see that your parents and your siblings and everybody's singing one type of song, and you kind of feel that you're not able to sing the same song like they are, you just have to always be kind of a pattern buster. And that's the way I felt it in my household, right? So part of me, that's why I asked you a question, because in my case, I wasn't adopted, but I felt it just from the just by watching the fact that I was the only one who wasn't beating to the same drum.
Right. I was that way my entire life, and wonderful. Dad was a 32nd degree Mason, so I had, a really solid value system in my life.
Wow.
And Mom was an English and Lit teacher, so she really instilled the curiosity and the reading, and of course Dad instilled curiosity as well. He was a tool and die machinist. So there was a lot of precision in my
That's true. That's true. And actually, it's good that you got that background, because to me, like all the teaching that comes from the Masonry is ancient teaching. See, the thing is, the teaching is embedded in all these different places,
Well, the
right?
Vedas, right? 15,000 years old.
Exactly.
Where, your things came from as well. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of looking at it simply, Vedas simply express the Vedantic philosophy is that we're all divine threads incarnate from the unit of consciousness, capable of being God conscious.
Exactly. I completely agree with that. And I actually explained that in my own way in the chapter 6, because, we are, which is the main reason we're supposed to process everything that comes to us, because it's kind of everybody's representing the part of God from the cosmos, right? We all are expressing
It
it.
doesn't mean we're all powerful. Being God conscious means that you're aware of your specificity, and I like to call it the perfected form, fit, and function in the world, which we often allude as the question, do I have a mission? Do I have a purpose? Right? And there are varying levels of that, depending on the awareness that you have and your creative design, right? Your genetic and your soul frequency that then ignites the codes as you accelerate on your own learning curve.
Right, because I say that every single person has a purpose and a mission. Depends on how you're living your life day to day, whether you get to ask that question, right? That completely is up to you, whether you give yourself a permission to even ask that question. That is completely up to you, because you are given that free will, right? To kind of come to that conclusion. But
Be careful what you ask for, because if you're not ready for it and it comes, man, it can be tumultuous.
Right. But the thing is that even whether you're ready or not, if you're meant to go in a certain direction, you're going to get to ask it when you keep on avoiding it. Right. So ultimately, you just have to become smart enough to see the sign and understand that. And then it comes back to integration, because if you integrate yourself right in this, because everything is connected, right? So if you integrate yourself right and do the quantum dance like a changer, then what happens is that you end up living a fulfilling life, and you end up loving the right way, and then you end up affecting humanity in the right way. So then it creates that ripple effect. So it becomes.
And there's all kinds of things that are available. I've been rather off planet my entire life. And so, it's kind of a fitting place being a moon child situated on the moon. I was fortunate in my ability to question, first of all, and the fact that when I had my kind of initial tumultuous experience early in my pre-med program, I came back from first quarter and was distraught. I'd gone back to ask my childhood, my high school sweetheart to marry me, and found out she was already married. That kind of threw a spanner into the works. And so I hit my knees and I prayed to know what truth was, and I was willing to die for it if necessary, not realizing what was going to happen. And a few days later, and just happened to be 11/11 of 1975, way before, you know, the 11/11 stuff started happening. What I ended up experiencing was being questioned if I was willing to die for what I believed in. I first thought of Christ consciousness. It felt a little empty, wasn't sure why, didn't question it, moved on to cosmic consciousness because I felt that was the next extension. It felt full, so I said yes. And I ended up out of body, in the light, beyond the light, told what I'm here to do, put, you know, and then at the end of it, the last words were trust and allow. And I came back into my body and retained this effervescent, iridescent, high-pitched sensation from where I was at, still have it today. And I also knew instantly that we are all cosmic consciousness condensed into form, just unaware. And to talk about that then, you know, of being able to access God conscious or anything like that, you were deemed crazy. And the following year, I was actually institutionalized because of it. So you got to be careful. Now it was 76 when that, or 77 actually, it was January. Having learned how not to talk, right? Or actually, it wasn't that I learned not to talk because I had a competency hearing because I was 19 when they committed me, when my parents committed me. So I had to go before the court to show that I was incompetent, right, in order to be institutionalized. And so I continued my story with the judge, trying to get people to listen. There was no listening there because there was no direct experience from which to have the listening. I didn't realize that then. So I'm, you know, I'm a college student talking to a kindergartner at that point, it seemed, right? And so back I went. And then I realized that, oh, I got to tell the doc what he wants to hear instead of what I want to talk about. And when I did, everything changed. And I was out within a few weeks. What it did do, though, is it gave me the fear of going back in and not being able to talk to people honestly when they'd ask me questions. I just want to be authentic. I'm a, you know, full disclosure, not just, my dad used to say, the truth is less than full disclosure. I'm like, well, you asked the question, I'm just going to let you know.
That's true. That's true.
That doesn't always work well.
That's true. I see your point. I see your point. And I think that the way to solve that problem is that you have to make sure that you create good filtering systems. So the people who are going to be close to you, going to be part of your tribe, whom you're going to trust, they truly are somebody who deserves that, right? Because then that way you don't have to keep on worrying about adjusting your filter. You've already done a good job in making sure that people around you are, you know, are at the level as you are. But you know,
in the beginning, though, when you're doing that, there's still going to be that turmoil because you haven't created that cluster or you haven't found your soul group yet, and you're experimenting, you're trying to find it. So you're going to have false starts or what may seem like it, no mistakes, right? There's always that incremental learning process that we see as mistakes or failures or something like that, which is that's the old societal view. The new view is, hey, good for you, you tried.
Exactly. Yeah, because you know, you're learning about yourself too, because you know, like boundary is one of those things where you are recognizing yourself that, oh, how far do I want to go? How far do I want to go for what I'm receiving in this relationship, right? And that is the gauge that you create. And you have to sometimes go much farther. And then you say, no, I think that was a little too much. Let me just bring myself back.
That's where you talk about the boundaries, right?
Exactly.
Where are my limitations? And not necessarily limitations, is where are my best choices as to what to out and what to say thank you, but no thank you.
Exactly. Because you're the only one who knows yourself best, right? So it's kind of interesting because that aspect, and then the second, when we were talking about the strength and weakness, right? We all have within us, and we have Christ consciousness within us. So when you know what you're given versus what you can do, what is in your toolbox, and what is in your challenge, then, you just become that person, right? Like the quantum being basically kind of highlights that how do you like, become like that Dorothy in the Wizard of the Oz, where you walk with all your curiosity, but you also are making friends along the way, and you keep walking, and you're ultimately, basically walking yourself home. You actually are home because, I mean, she was basically,
Right. Yeah,
yeah,
these folks, it's funny. So many, when they go through this process, I long for home, right? It's like they want to be like there's some place else that would make them feel at home. And my response is, wait a minute, you're here. This is your home. You're not anyplace else. You take your home with you in the present moment, wherever you're at.
that is true, because you are home. You're always home, even when you think you're not.
Right. And if you don't like home, well, redecorate.
Well, that's the thing, that we have all the tools for us to change our circumstances, which is why I teach all these courses and training. And I love that, because to me, I have changed my reality like in a very mega way so many times. And I like
Well, and
people
even
to know.
being in the field that you're in, rocket science, as a systems engineer, how, this is the amazing question, right? How do you bridge those worlds? Because when you're in that very data-driven environment, how do you bring this other level of awareness into that and work with those who are in that environment as well? Because sometimes they're open. I'd mentioned to you earlier that I'd met Dr. Edgar Mitchell, and he's one of those that, because of his experience of going to the
That's
moon,
true.
and he may have even taken this picture, I don't know. However, that alone just made him amazingly interested in consciousness, and even starting the Institute of Noetic Sciences when he got back.
That's
So
true.
how do you integrate this, and what are your bridge factors in doing so?
Okay, so one thing that we all need to remember is wherever you go, there you are, right?
Hmm.
So because you're vibrating with your frequency and vibration, right? So
Right.
the law of attraction is at play in every aspect of your life. So the thing is that people who are going to come and work with me, or the people whom I'm going to interact with, they're going to be one of those people who need to exchange with me, just like I need to exchange with them. So when we understand that,
Quantum relationships.
exactly. So your place, like, so it's never, nothing is like a coincidence. Nothing is like happenstance. Everything happens because of the way you vibrate and the way they vibrate. And then you come in each other's presence, or you work in a project together. Whatever you do, there's that exchange going on. The thing is that generally, yes, when I work with people, whenever I share some of my concepts or even a little bit about my background, it raises eyebrows, because majority of the people I work with, they had like a kind of a little bit more simpler life than mine. So they kind of look at me as like, wow, like we have never met anyone like you, right? So in a way, they put me on a category of
Well, and that
somebody.
opens the door.
That's
Right?
true, because they already put me in a category that I'm a little bit different. I don't go to the same church they do. I don't even have the same skin color. Like I mean, I'm just saying there are so many ways they can put me in a little bit of like an exotic species category. So the good thing about that is that because they already put me in that category, whatever I say, it's all kind of like covers it up, because they are not expecting me to be like them because of the fact that they already see it as a different person, right?
Yes.
And then what I do, and that's something that actually showed up in my human design too, that apparently I have a knack for kind of bringing bringing the transformation without imposing. It's almost like, how like everybody has some gifts, right? So that's why I can easily make friends. It's like people, I'm able to get to the people in a way that they are like, whenever I'm talking to people, for example, they would share their deep dark secret with me, and then they would realize afterwards that they don't know why they did that. They're like, I never say this to anyone, but I feel like saying this to you. So it's almost like there's that, like it's almost like I provide them the safe environment, right?
Sure.
Which kind of makes it good for me too, because I like to work with people whom I can feel safe. So it works, that dance works. And what I've also noticed, that everything that I've done in engineering world is what I use in my, you know, when I make my course packages, right? Like I make training packages. I mean, I'm extremely good with PowerPoint because, you know, as an engineer, you have to be able to take the very complex concept and make it simple so you can present
Put
it
them
to
into
everybody
charts
else.
and graphs and bullet points and all that.
All of that. So
Yeah.
all of the things that I do for the, you know, rocketry, I can do that for consciousness and human, you know, human evolution. So
Mhm.
for me, it actually is very interesting because they kind of go hand in hand because I learned the structure, I learned the system, I learned how to organize information being an engineer. So I use that in able to devise something that I want to help a mind to grow by stepping up into a Jacob's ladder, like, you know, one
Sure.
step at a time.
Right.
So
Well,
yeah,
and the advantage is you've been there, and so you can deconstruct the process in order to share it with others and even become more effective at doing so because it's almost, it's like writing a book. It's really cathartic,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Because you're questioning yourself, and as you're writing, you're questioning what you're writing. And so there's, sometimes a tertiary, maybe even quaternary
Layers of
levels of
questioning.
questions.
That's true. And the thing about me is that I am not like attached to anything that I believe in today. Okay. I believe in it and I'm going to tell you what I believe in. I have no problem with that. But tomorrow, if I expand my belief, I don't have a problem with that either because I believe that we're all work in progress. We're continuously evolving and growing. So there's nothing written in a stone. However, I always say that this is the foundation I'm operating from. So that way you know where I am. And that makes it easier to do whatever we're going to do with each other.
Mhm. Precisely. Now, speaking of foundation you're working from, the quantum being, we had a little prelim before going live here. We were talking about quantum mechanics and the multi-worlds view and how it seems anyway that we're kind of on the same page as, now wait a minute, this is more of an intellectual thought experiment in looking at the multi-world scenario, and even the quantum mechanic people will say, yes, this is our theory. And, one thing, there's a wave until you look at it, and then it becomes visible as a particle. And yet, so that's, it's the objective of when you're looking at it, depending on how you are, when you are, why, and what's going on in your head, you'll see it differently. And they're saying that in doing so, there's also the possibility that a part of you splits off and becomes another person in another universe. And like, that really doesn't make sense because we have one reference point. And I would like to say it's that point of light that's internalized, that's part of that cosmic consciousness, right? We live in one world, there's one experience, we have multiple ways of that experience happening, and yet it's individualistic, specified to the one. Now, how can we take that understanding of the quantum world, Mike Nepean Close's model, the triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm? They posit that consciousness, space, and time are tethered across 9 dimensions. I had an experience in '89 of what is called the multi-plane awareness technique, which takes the experiencer through 9 planes of consciousness to integrate their bodies on each of those planes. Now, those 2 models, one, experienced it in '89, and then they published their paper in 2010 that, quite frankly, resonated so deeply that, yeah, here's the science that explains my experience. And they say there's more, yet those 9 planes are what we are limited to in this physical body.
Okay.
So that, to me, makes a lot more sense because there's no guesswork to it. There's total trust in the one focal point of where we make our choices from and the ability we have to experience that. How would that, do you think, shift these quantum modelists that are definitely, they're trying to figure out how nature works, but they seem like they're putting they're projecting their theories rather than asking the questions of how does it work and asking nature how it works instead of telling us how they think it works.
Right.
What difference does that, am I making sense, first of all? And does it resonate at all? And then if it does, where do you think if you're in agreement, and I think that you probably are, where can we take that?
Okay, so as far as number of dimension goes, I know you said 9. I've heard 12, especially from quantum physics perspective.
Well, that's 12.
Theory,
That's starting from, let me clarify that. So the 9, we're on the 3rd. So the 9 would make it 12.
oh, you mean like 9 other dimensions? So 9
Additional.
So basically you're talking about 12 dimensions as well. Yeah, because 12 dimensions.
It seems that way.
12
Yeah.
archangels, 12 chakras, all are kind of a way to kind of define the different cones of light, cones of light within us, right? So that's just about dimension. Now, what you were saying about the quantum mechanics guy that you heard, right? Who were kind of talking about the fact that when you are observing something and you can actually ultimately merge with the part of you and split, right? Like you were talking
Right.
about. Okay, so that point of view versus what mine is. So I'll just explain mine, and then we can see how we can converge all of these in some way. So the way it works is that, you know, observation affects momentum, right? That is quantum physics. So when you are, let's say, if you are observing something, you are not just observing it because you're affecting it.
Correct.
Right? So when you're affecting something, you're also affecting yourself, right? Because it's a bidirectional thing. Everything's bidirectional because you're, you know, right? Because everything is connected. So everything is bidirectional. Now, the thing is that when you really start getting into like string theory or membrane theory, right? Like scientific way, the whole idea and the concept is that there's many versions of you in different universe, right? Playing a role. They have different deviations from each other because, you know, in one universe, let's say the one you said about the trauma that you had with the lover you wanted to be with, in one universe, you actually did not have the trauma and you were able to marry that person, for example, right? So that is a mindset that people, like I'm explaining you from that perspective.
It's a mental model.
Exactly. So you're right. There are many versions of you based on certain binary choices that you made, yes, no, and it took you to a different part of the trajectory in the fractal holographic.
Yeah, whether it's a right-hand spin or left-hand spin, or it goes up or it goes down as it passes through the
exactly. So there's all these things going on, but the one where you end up tapping into, right, which is where your seat of consciousness is within that light that you are in. That's where you're looking everything from that perspective, because you only have a perspective based on where you are seated. And you understand that better than anybody because you had out of body experience, because that's all about where your seat of consciousness is when, you know, from that perspective, right? So the point of the story is that at a time, because you can only be in one place experiencing that, or at least paying attention to it or looking at it from that perspective. So at a time, I agree with you when you were saying that at a time, you know, there's only one me and one, you know, like I'm looking at it from that perspective, which is true. I think that I did not hear their entire conversation, so I don't really know. But one thing I would say is that when you get lost in something to the point where you embody it, that you become that, right? You become what you're, right, observing.
Well, it's like, you know, I feel like we're all tesseracts, right? That we project our intention out, and then as it comes back, because we've just created something, that is a universal law. What you ask for, you will get, whether it's an unconscious ask or a conscious ask. And then as what you're seeking is also seeking you. So as the tesseract, you know, embraces it on the way back in. It's a wonderful model. And so true, and it explains a lot. However, where we go, what we experience is because of the choice we make of where our attention, where our intention and interactions reside.
Exactly. 100% agree with that. which is the reason where, like all the binary yes and all the binary no that you did and I did for you and I to quantum collapse in this reality for this 1 hour, right? That happened because of that, because of all that convergence, right? That brought us together.
Right. And even, ancient greetings, namaste, I recognize the divine in you, and worship that, the divine
Exactly.
in me recognizes the divine in you. The Mayan phrase that I open with, enlightening, means I am another you. So essentially,
Exactly.
we're you, or, we're us. Instead of ego, we're we go, and we're having
Right.
a conversation, dancing together.
Exactly.
Isn't that an amazing place to be? And how can we share that so that it's more understood and available to others? Because we're in that flux stage, if you will, coming out of the event that, where we were all obsessed on self-hygiene and sequestered, and had the opportunity to look within and say, who am I really?
That's true.
So where do you see that going? Because we're moving towards a new age, an age of Aquarius. Right?
Right.
Now the Piscean age, we're in a 50-year window according to Jose Arguelles. And in that process, it seems that the entropy is lessening. It's getting greater in some areas, but for an individual experience, it lessens. And so time collapses a little bit because you get more done in harmony than you do outside of it. What do you see the future looking like? And how do you see these discoveries that we're talking about playing out in the world?
I definitely feel that future is looking bright. I also believe that people are going to make choices on what type of earth or what type of tribe or what type of community, what type of lifestyle they're going to do. And all those choices are going to bring the world to them the way they want it. So we are all kind of deciding that. We have done that all our lives, but now it's going to become even more heightened because it's no longer
Almost
that,
imperative.
exactly, because it's no longer that you don't care that whom do you vote for a president and you say, you know what, it doesn't really affect my day-to-day life, so I'm just going to not bother with that, right? It's not going to be that like that because everything is going to come home. So you have to become very true to yourself, right? And choose what you want to do, be honest, and just follow that path. If it doesn't work, follow the other path, but you're going to have to be a little bit more true to yourself, right? Like to be honest to yourself. And if you're confused or you don't understand, then there are so many people like you,
And
me.
there's levels of being true to yourself too that you may not be aware of initially when you start making those choices.
Exactly. But true to yourself is actually easier than not. The only reason people find it harder is because they have been following everybody else's agenda so much that they've forgotten how to just like you said, that when you are not thinking, when you were completely between thoughts, when you were completely in that pause, when you heard that voice. So it's like people have to give that opening for themselves so that they can actually hear their own voice or hear what they really want, right? And I think that is going to open doors for everyone, and it's going to get multiplied because of the 100 monkey effect. It's
Sure.
going to multiply because of the ripple effect we're creating. And I believe that the way people have spent their time and energy is going to change, because I feel like a lot of things that we see in a society that works right now, like people who are people who become really famous, let's say, because everybody wants to hear them. That to me is like an old paradigm. I think people want result, and I am looking for that type of community and tribe, because I am all about let's walk the talk. Okay,
Right.
let's not just talk about it, and let's not just look important. Let's
Well, you
actually
got the
live.
awareness, you got the knowledge, you're responsible at that point. Why would you not want to walk the talk? Right. And like you say, it is easy. It seems hard to begin with because you're leaving everything behind and you're going to have some separation anxiety and maybe some grief from the deaths that you're going to experience with the ego. And yet there's this golden opportunity to begin making other choices and
Yes.
see the difference that makes. The only difference is the other life was undisciplined. You just accepted what was given to you without question, and you moved in that direction. Once you make a choice to move out of that, it's a discipline to maintain that choice.
Exactly.
How does one maintain that choice with relative ease, do you think?
It's again representing themselves no matter what, right? So in my case, every single decision that I made that were very, very that brought me on a crossroad, and the decision that I made was never a popular decision. I never made a decision that everybody gave me an award for, or I got a Guinness Book of World Record for that, right? It was always, everybody said no to me. Everybody said, how dare you? Everybody made me feel guilty, right? But I did it anyway. And if I wouldn't have done it,
you were doing you.
and if I wouldn't have done it, I wouldn't be talking to you. So the point of the story is, because, and not only did I make decisions just by being selfish, I always had children's involved, right? When I divorced my husband's. So I had to think about everybody whose life was affected by me, by my decision. But then I would look at the trajectory as an engineer, right? Like, okay, extrapolate this scenario, extrapolate this one. And I would see all these different things happening. Like,
therein is the multiverse, right? You look at all the possibilities, but you only choose one.
Exactly. I agree with that. You have to, right? Because that's the binary world we live in, because you say yes to one thing, and that means you say no to everything else, right? So that is very true. And the thing is that when you make a decision consciously as a leader, depending on all the lives that you're going to be impacted, you have to become a Captain Picard, Star Trek. You have to become a good leader, right? So that you can make the right choice and do right with, and you have to have a good intention with it. And once you have all of that faculty there, it's all about you being honest, true, being comfortable with yourself, being able to sleep at night. Like, you that work is all inner work, and nobody's going to see it. Only you will feel it.
For a time. And as you continue to do that, the recognition comes through the others around you, because they're more than likely going to be reflecting the same. And in that energy, and I think this is kind of what you said earlier, you attract those that help build each other.
That's true.
This isn't about the siloed pyramid with the alpha male or female at the top that's in competition with the one next door.
Right, right.
It becomes more chaotic, and kind of like D Hawk did with the initial launch of Visa, right? He brought a bunch of qualified people with the skill set necessary to cover the gamut of the requirements of the job or the vision or mission, and turned them loose. There was no hierarchy. Just like, okay, here's the task, guys, go after it.
That's true, because it's interesting, because I look at the competition and living complementary, right? Like, complementary living is good. Competition is good sometimes when you're like competing, that like if you are both in a
it's driving you to be better, not necessarily to make more. That's
exactly. And also, like, if you do a healthy competition where you are going with your buddy in the gym and both of you want to look hot, right? And you say, well, I'm going to look hotter than you. That's a good competition, because at least if that drives your motivation, then fine, do it, right?
Right.
But that to me is where you need to gauge that, where you want to do that versus not, right? But complementary community and tribe is what we need to go forward, because we've been doing competition. Look at Earth. There's so much war going on because of competition.
Yeah, can't we all just get along? That's such a simple question, and the answer is yes. We just choose not to.
Right. And I think we need to raise the bar on that self-awareness, and also that how law of conservation of energy works, right? Like, you are never going to be starved to death if you do the right thing for another human.
Absolutely. Living proof, both you and I, right? And others like us. And it's not that difficult. There's a lot of trust involved. And that trust grows over time when you show yourself that your choices resonate, they feel right. And the proof is what's happening in front of you. That's the best meter that I know of, is that you got questions about whether things are working or not. Look what's going on around you. How do you feel about it?
Exactly. That's the best gauge. And I also say that even if you do get exploited by people, I believe in law of conservation of energy and golden rule. So at the end of the day, everybody will have to deal with their own story. I feel that as long as I didn't exploit someone, I feel that I can sleep with myself at night. And
Mhm.
I'm good with that, right? If somebody else exploited me, then the good thing is it's not my problem. You know, I learned I'm not going to ever let somebody exploit me more than once, because then it's my problem. Then
Unless there's an agreement to exploit each other, right? To take
but,
advantage, because that's the word,
but
it's
that's
like
not even
manipulation.
exploiting.
There's two connotations to that. One can seem kind of negative. The other is like, well, you got to do things in certain ways in order to get people structured to do what they can do best. And
Right, but then
there's
then I wouldn't use the word exploit, then I would use reciprocity, right? Because then you're doing it in a way that both party is getting what they need from each other, and that becomes a complementary relationship. And that's where we want to be headed, where nobody feels that, you know, they were violated in any way.
right. It's like the Mobius strip. It's always giving, right? There's always that movement. It never goes anywhere else. Once you establish that, it's there. It's locked in. We have it already. We just don't recognize. We have that God consciousness available. We've been
Exactly.
told throughout history by I don't know how many different, soothsayers and leaders and saviors and, all kinds of things. And when, we got the memo 15,000 years ago, we
I think that we
we're
are
a little
all
slow on the uptake, right?
yeah. And it's partly because, you know, everybody gets distracted. It's so easy to get distracted with so much going on around you. So I think that the reason you are doing what you're doing and the reason I'm doing what I'm doing is we're just wanting people to be aware that what is home and what is best for human evolution.
Absolutely. And ultimately we just want to all get along and be happy on a planet. And we can do that. The systems in place, in my opinion, the systems aren't awry. They're really well designed. They're just mismanaged. And we've got enough materials, resources, and people to satisfy any need that there may be in the world, including hunger and shelter. We
Yes,
just don't do it. We choose to be at war instead of care for one another.
exactly. Again,
What's
and
the
that
easier
choice,
choice there? It's like the 70,000 plus thoughts we have a day. Most of them are self-deprecating, and still until you start slowing down, which is usually the meditation process, right? A lot of people think that meditation means you want to just still your mind. No, that's not the case. You want to be able to quiet the mind enough to observe your thinking and not be a participant of it.
exactly.
Then you can begin to choose how to think and
You
feel.
can make better choices, right? Because it's
Yeah,
all about making better choice. Like going forward here, I'm telling you, people will have to decide where they want to be, right? It's no longer going to be that they can keep on staying indecisive, because not making a choice is a choice too.
very, very true. Very true. With that, what in your vast insight and wisdom, what would be one of the best questions or pieces of advice that you could offer others who are in that questioning state, whether it's beginning or looking for a career change, or I'm guessing that it's going to be a similar offering. What would be your advice to those?
I think the best advice I can give people right now is that honor your own power and your own belief and your own thought, and don't let other people sway you in different directions. Just keep listening to your inner navigation system. And sometimes it helps to go, like, you know, when you, like, especially when I was on a crossroad and I would go to people that I knew, they were always kind of wanting me to stay in the loop that they were in, because they didn't want to lose me. You see,
Mhm.
it's almost like they knew that if I actually, like, you know, Sunny in that iRobot, if you ask too many questions, you're not going to be here any longer, because you'll be in a different place, like flying seagull,
Right.
right? So people are scared because people love you and sometimes they get a little bit addicted to you. So what I'm saying is, that when you're on a crossroad and you see that you're not getting any help from people you know, then go outside of your group. Ask, hire somebody, like even pay for a life coaching session. Why not? I actually offer one-on-one session. The point is, do something
As do
different.
I as well.
Perfect. So go to Zen, or go to me, or go to anybody you like, or go to even somebody who is other than whom you've gone. You see my point? The point is, do something different, because when you change one thing, you change everything.
Very true. Shehnaz, thank you so much. This has just been a really enjoyable conversation, and one of the first times I've actually been able to talk about quantum physics to somebody who knows something about it and can reflect from that. So thank you so much. And I'm sure that our audience and will have some wonderful reflections and see themselves to some degree in where we were, and hopefully be able to take that information into themselves and move forward in their own lives. That's my heart's desire, and I know that's yours too.
Yeah, no, thank you for this opportunity. And basically, if anybody's looking for what I'm doing for humanity, just check my website out. It's shehnazsoni.com. And I'm publishing my courses there and my coaching and all that good stuff, because I feel like it's time that we all follow our calling and do what we can do for ourselves and others.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for being you.
Thank you.
And namaste and in catch. Thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host, and I will see you next time.